I'm sure you'd have seen a recent study. I think George E. Eric Westman, and a few others published a case series of 31 patients, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar, and depression, and put them all on ketogenic diets, and pretty much all of them saw some improvement. Some went into remission. Did you have any input or insight into that study, or I'm sure you've seen it, I would imagine.
In fairness, and I don't want to take away from the successes of it, and we'll talk about the successes of it. But as you said, of the patients who were able to do it, so the psychiatrist kind of self-selected 31 patients. So right there's a little bit of bias because he probably chose people that he thought would be able to do a diet and would be game for it and everything else. And even then, 3 of those patients dropped out early on. They could not do the diet, and they were in the hospital. They were getting spoon-fed this diet, and they couldn't do it. So 10% of the people dropped out right away, even with all of that intensive support, and even though the psychiatrist had the discretion of choosing who he wanted. But of the 28 patients who remained on the study, almost all of them lost weight. Almost all of them experienced improvement in their symptoms. I think 60% officially met criteria for remission of their chronic depression, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia, although they didn't separate which ones got the remission. My suspicion is it was the depressed patients, possibly more often, who got the full remission. But then that gets into the really tricky stuff of, as I said, the current medications that we prescribe, they cause weight gain, they cause diabetes and insulin resistance, they cause cardiovascular disease. We know that. It's on the package inserts. The FDA says that is true. I'm not being a hypocrite by saying that. I'm not being a crazy quack by saying that. It's right on the package insert by the FDA. And the ketogenic diets or carnivore diets are trying to reverse those disorders. They're trying to reverse obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular risk factors. But if you have these powerful drugs still that you're taking every day, fighting you against in that battle, that may be interfering with your ability to fully recover or go into remission. And they commented in that study that I think 60% or so were able to reduce meds. They didn't talk about whether they got anybody completely off meds, and they didn't talk about what meds they got people off of. And I think those are really important variables in kind of thinking about how to translate this in real life. Is one of the goals that I have for people when I put them on a diet is if the diet seems to be working for them, what I've found is that they often don't get a miracle cure yet. We have to then try to get them safely off their meds in order to get the miracle cure. And that's hard to do.
Yeah, Chris, interesting point, because you said, we are happy to prescribe antipsychotics, antidepressants up the wazoo. I mean, the number of people on those things is outstanding, right? It's astonishing how many Americans and people worldwide are on these drugs. And like you said, they raise cardiovascular risk. That's a known, complete known. And yet people are saying, oh my God, don't go on this diet because it might raise your cardiovascular risk, even though it provides you probably better benefits. So it's a very hypocritical stance. Now, I want to point out, in the audience today, I see at least 2 people, Brett and James, both of which have basically put into remission severe depression. Brett had depression with psychotic features. James, bipolar and schizoaffective disorder. They're off all meds and they're doing great. And I mean, it's because of some of the work you've been doing to inspire them, and just diet does have a role. And I've been saying this for several years now to much pushback. I mean, to me, do you get a lot of pushback, Chris? Because I mean, maybe as a psychiatrist, do you have a little more authority to speak on mental health than a stupid orthopedic surgeon like me does? But I mean, it's one of those things where it's amazing to me that we have people in the community that think nutrition and diet has nothing to do with mental health disorders. Is that still a prevailing belief that you run into?
It is. So for the overwhelming majority of human beings on this planet, whether they are mental health professionals or just healthcare practitioners or people with mental illness or families, loved ones, overwhelming majority of people are highly skeptical that diet plays a role in mental illness, and in particular in serious mental illness. So it is a major uphill battle. I will tell you that I take a different approach to try to convince people. I talk about science and cell biology and, metabolism and oxidative stress and neurotransmitter balances and inflammation in the brain and all sorts of stuff that maybe some people in the, in the non-medical community wouldn't understand. But people in the medical community understand it, and certainly researchers understand it. And that ends up buying me a lot of credibility. And so the way that I've been able to get a lot of credibility, and I've been able to get a lot of people to take this seriously, is I draw on all of the decades of research that we have in the neurology field, because they've been studying the ketogenic diet for a century now and trying to figure out, how the hell does this work? Like, how the hell does a diet stop seizures when all of our pills won't? And so we actually have a tremendous resource in the neurology literature to tap into and to defend, like, hey, this diet stops seizures, so it's not really that far-fetched to think it might help mental disorders, because we use seizure treatments all the time in psychiatry for a wide variety of disorders, including, and very prominently, serious mental disorders like bipolar disorder in particular, and chronic depression. We use those treatments all the time in tens of millions of people. And so I personally, when I give talks, usually people are really excited about it. But I find that, even sometimes people who listen to my talk will then go say to somebody else, hey, I heard that the keto diet can cure schizophrenia. And then everybody thinks they're a quack for saying that because they don't know all this science. They don't know how to defend it in the way that I do. I'm like a high-powered lawyer, if you want to think about it in that way, who can use big words and big language to try to defend what you all already know, probably. So I'm just putting it in a language that makes it defensible. But for instance, I'm talking with, the National Alliance for Mental Illness and the American Psychiatric Association. I'm talking on one of their webinars later today. They actually invited me. But it's funny because they have warned me up and down. You've got to be cautious about this ketogenic diet. You can't be telling everybody to go out and try it on their own. This sounds dangerous. I'm like, calm down, people. But yeah.